That's so cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Again, we are with the International Dyslexia Association Oregon branch. If you have questions as we go, go Wolves already. As you have questions as we go along tonight, jump on and we'll try to answer them the best we can. But can you take us through your process? Were you diagnosed with dyslexia or?
I wasn't diagnosed until I was in middle school.
Okay.
I was in special ed from the time I was in kindergarten all the way up until eighth grade, but it wasn't sixth grade until I actually got a diagnosis. And I did a little bit of tutoring with Shelby to try and help me through that, but it was because it was so late, it was a lot of me figuring everything out and just kind of pushing my way through and doing things the way that I could do them.
So I have so many questions. So going back, as you were going through, you didn't have a clue of like kind of why you were in special ed, or did they no diagnosis? Just kind of did they have a reason for putting you into special ed, or how did that work?
I obviously had some sort of learning disability. I think um, I was just diagnosed as a general LD, learning
Okay.
disability. And it wasn't until way later that they actually found out it was dyslexia. And so it just general LD all the way through, and sped teachers did that with me.
Um, and then what led to you getting tested for dyslexia specific?
Actually, it was Shelby Park. She was my neighbor, and one day her and my mom were talking, and Shelby's like, "You should check this out." And so my mom went up to a convention in Seattle with Shelby, I believe. And that's kind of one thing kind of led to another, and eventually we were able to figure out that that is why I was having so many troubles.
When you got the diagnosis, was that helpful to you? Did that was it what was that like?
My initial reaction was actually really negative. I didn't love having the diagnosis and didn't love having the label. I later found out that two of my best friends were dyslexic as well, and so that kind of having a support system with that that I felt for myself.
Oh, you broke up.
Where we're like, spelling doesn't matter. We're just gonna talk and make it like figure it out the best we can and make fun of ourselves, and it really helps.
It's so cool. So I kind of had the opposite experience. Like I grew up not knowing anybody. No one ever talked about it. And so went all the way through with like not knowing, but one of the kids on my track team was dyslexic, but I didn't find out till later in life. And it was like, he was like one of the coolest kids. It would have been awesome to have the connection. What do you think of this? So our student panel now, they came up with this concept, you are not alone. I don't know if that existed when you were going through it, but what do you think of this and uniting these students together, and what's maybe what are you seeing that on the education side from those connections?
I think it's so important. That particular phrasing wasn't around when I was on the student panel, but I think it's so amazing for kids to be able to see that. I've had students in my class that were dyslexic, and the parents and the students feel very alone. They don't know what's happening, and they don't. Like, it's again, it's not something that people talk about necessarily. And so just to know that there's people that are experiencing the same thing and have experienced the same thing, I think it is hugely beneficial to everyone involved.
As you were going through, were there did you have any labels going to, like, you obviously went on to get credentialed. Was there did you have any doubts about getting through school, or any of that that popped up, or was it, how was that experience?
In high school, it was a lot tougher than in college, actually. I think just because it's high school, honestly. There were a lot of late nights and there was a lot of pushing myself and things. And then in college, I kind of learned I could work at my own pace was a really big one, being able to have class and work when I needed to and could. And so I think that that was really helpful. And yeah, I had doubts a lot in high school, but once I reached college, I was like, I'm already here. We're just gonna make this happen.
Oh, that's so awesome. We have someone from Australia joining us. Good day, Nate from Australia is joining us on this call. Um, Nate, if you have questions, feel free to ask. We're going through it right now, talking about dyslexia, being diagnosed, and I got to ask. Then, did you always know you wanted to become a teacher?
Yeah, I was never one of those people who wanted to be a firefighter or a vet. Like I have always wanted to become a teacher.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, so
And are you? Was that because of your own experience, or was there another reason behind that?
I think that there were a couple of different reasons. First, my own experience. I had some really not so great teachers and some really, really amazing teachers. And so I feel like that's why people get into the teaching profession is one of those two. And then also, I've just always loved to care for people and things, and teaching just seemed like the natural way to go about that.
Uh, it's impressive. It's awesome. Shelby's asking, what accommodations did you use in college? Did you have accommodations at college?
I didn't have any official accommodations. If you went and talked to professors, they were really nice. Like, always go talk to the teacher. That is my number one thing for people, and advocate for yourself. In college, I just had to make sure that I had everything either like online or in a way that I could access it and be able to manipulate it. I made sure that I could type everything. And if it was like a handwritten exam, I made sure that the professor knew that I may need extra time on it or that I may need to type it if they wanted to ever be able to actually read it. And professors were very open to that. It was great.
um, do you speak about your dyslexia with your current students?
I do. I had a conversation with one of my students and their parents recently who was diagnosed, and like the mom felt so much relief when I let her know and was like, I understand the emotions that he's going through, and I'm gonna help you through this because it's a hard time, but we're gonna make it work, and he's gonna rock it. And so it was so empowering on my side to be able to like share that experience with them, and then like have them having someone who knew what they were going through was really helpful, I think, as well.
That is so comforting to have that connection, I think, with somebody else who's been there, done it, and is on the other side of it. And to Nate's point here, your experience and challenges will be such a great tool for the children you teach in the years to come. So I think it's well said, Nate. And I think to your point, it really matches up. So going back a second, did you have accommodations in high school?
I did. In high school, we tried a bunch of different combinations of accommodations. Was allowed to have a laptop, and this was before that was a thing, before everyone had laptops. That was when my laptop was still 20 pounds. And I could type everything. I could have extra time on tests and things. I think on vocabulary tests, they could be read to me, which was really embarrassing sometimes because it would be another student that the teacher would have it read to me. And
While the
so
class was going on, or like, would you go in the hall, or how?
we would go into the hall, but my high school, there was no like everyone could see everything.
I got you. Okay.
And so that accommodation I did not use very often
How
because of
was
that.
being called out in that? Was that an issue, being called out like that in the situation for you?
Oh, for sure. I hated it. And I was always an overachiever. Like it was A or nothing. And so like to make it feel like I was different and I wasn't earning that A because someone else was helping me and other people were seeing it, it was a huge source of shame for me.
And did that affect how you advocated for yourself in high school, or like how did that filter in? Or
Um,
when did you start advocating for yourself?
so I didn't start advocating for myself until I was a sophomore, and that was because actually one of my freshman English teachers came up to me in May or June and said, "I didn't know that you were dyslexic. I didn't know that you needed these accommodations." And so starting that next year, I was like, I guess I need to just walk up and tell teachers this.
Okay. But it still is a sophomore. Like you're not. That's not an old. Like you're young at that.
Yeah, still 15, 16, and like going up to teachers and saying, you need to do this for me, it's extremely nerve wracking.
So Danielle also asked, do you talk to fellow colleagues about your dyslexia?
I constantly do because there is not enough training for teachers for dyslexia. And teachers often really feel lost when they come to it. And there's a lot of things that are put in place to make it look like states are doing the right thing when they're not. And so I'll constantly talk about it. And also, maybe I make a slip up or I take an extra 10 minutes to read an email or something. And I think it's just better to be open. Also, teachers tend to be really kind people, especially elementary teachers, and really empathetic. And they like to know that there's someone that they can go to and say, hey, I have this kid. What do you think? And so I found it actually is really helpful to tell people.
That's that's awesome. And to this, we have another question from Jane on the line. Like, with sounds and hearing sounds can sometimes be difficult for dyslexics or students in general. And like, how do you, are you able to address that with students, or have you found techniques that work with students regarding auditory processing?
For myself, the chaos of a classroom, I typically am pretty okay with because it's a low buzz. But if there's like any music or talking or anything, like during read aloud, we've had to talk about how I have to have complete silence or I can't read. And the kids and I have talked about that. For kids, I try and make it just really well known to the class. Like some people have issues with learning when there's talking, and so that's why we have to be empathetic and um, also like offering things like headphones and maybe even like classical music in the background during like read aloud or silent read time so that there's something else for them to listen to.
Um, on that note, what it would you like teachers to know or educators to know about dyslexia in just in general? Like, what would you like to see happen in our school systems?
I really want to see more teachers trained on dyslexia and the myths of dyslexia because there are so many myths and so many teachers don't really understand what that is. People, still saying that overlays should work, and there's just so many myths out there and so many things that have gone in and out of fashion that I just think like the truth about dyslexia really needs to be taught. And then also there needs to be a wider variety of people who can actually diagnose dyslexia in schools. Because there's not a lot of that, especially in Oregon, and that's so unfortunate. And there's not a lot of people who know how to teach for people who are dyslexic. And again, that's unfortunate because what do we do with the diagnosis then?
Yeah, so many points to touch on here. Can we dive into the myths a little bit? Like, what I know overlays, but any other specific myths that we still finding around the school systems regarding dyslexia that you could touch on that you're
Yes, let me think. I've heard reading upside down. I've heard that like all people who are dyslexic are the same. Um, like you can spell just fine. Why are you like, why do you say you're dyslexic? Or, oh, I think I'm dyslexic because I sometimes switch numbers, or like just so many myths in there with all of that.
it's just funny because we talked to our student panel about this and they go through the myths that just drive them. It's hard. I think it's hard on them. It takes a shot at them a little bit with the myths, and they have to re-explain themselves, and so that becomes a challenging environment for our current students that are in the system. So I think it's important to at least identify what those are. Um, you mentioned testing. Is that's still an issue within the school systems of identifying students that have dyslexia or potentially have dyslexia?
So in Oregon, as far as I understand, at least in my district, every kinder and new incoming first grader go through a screener. But the problem is that then nothing is done with that screener. There just aren't enough people who are experts in dyslexia that can then take that further and say this kid needs to be tested more. And also it's a misconception because people think that the screener is a test for dyslexia rather than what it is. It's a screener to see maybe there's a problem here.
So it's almost like it kind of bottlenecks at that point. It's like it's the start of something, but the action beyond that point and what happens, we don't really have a solution for.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That can make a tough situation. That can make it even harder on the teachers that are going through. What has, in opening up to your colleagues, what has, what have you found, like any findings from that experience, like any backlash from opening up to colleagues? I think a lot of times dyslexics are afraid to reveal themselves because they're concerned about their next professional endeavor or what that might do for them. And so it just have you had any of that or experienced any of that?
I'm really fortunate where I have not. I actually use it in job interviews to show that I'm empathetic with students and that because I really believe in authentic teaching. And if a kid corrects me when I'm spelling, I reward them for that because it means they're paying attention. And so I bring it up in job interviews and I say, this is what it is. And I've never really experienced any negative backlash. I've been really fortunate in that.
Great. And it's great that you're opening up about it because I think that it's going to build not only opportunities for yourself, but people that you won't even meet in your life. You're opening doors for them right now, which is awesome. And Jane is complimenting your empathy and what you're bringing to the classroom is just so inspiring and so needed. Um, how are you right now? Like health wise and all the stuff that's going on, like gotta ask, like what is that like right now?
It's terrible. I never want to teach online ever again. I miss my kids so, so much. And I build so much of my teaching on human interaction, and the fact that I can't do that right now is making me crazy. Also, the fact that everything's on a screen and I have to read everything right now, and it's really exhausting having to be on like that all day, every day. And so I'm tired, but I'm making it work. And I work with some really amazing people who are so helpful and everyone's supporting each other.
Well, we are definitely thankful for you and what you're doing and the going above and beyond the call of duty to impart knowledge on young students right now because it's needed and your work's just invaluable and so appreciated by so many on this line as well as myself, and I know our student panel is cheering you on for sure. Um, I always like to, oh, we got, see here. Curious, is teaching undergrads required to take courses part of undergrad degree in relation to students who may need help learning? So is there like undergrad programming? Like, is there specific programming for teaching students that might have dyslexia or other learning challenges?
It depends on the school that you go to. The particular school I went to, Western Oregon University, we had an entire class that was essentially dedicated to dyslexia and other, specifically like reading learning disabilities. And I had a class or two on learning disabilities and how to teach students with disabilities, but there is not a huge amount in an undergrad for just an elementary education degree. If I wanted to go further, I would have to go in and get like my master's in SPED. But there is some out there.
That's good to know. And then I always like to leave our guests with the last word or what you want everyone to know. Like if you could give your stamp or takeaway for the audience being educators, parents, or students, what would be your kind of final thought on that?
Advocate for yourself, advocate for your students, advocate for your kids. Don't be afraid to like be that really annoying person who's saying we need this, I need this, she needs this, whatever, because making your voice heard is what's going to make a change for you and then also make a change later down the road.
I can't argue with that by any means. Adrianna, we appreciate you joining us tonight, representing the student panel tonight with the International Dyslexia Association Oregon branch. You heard it. Advocate, advocate, advocate. Shelby, amazing recruiting job. We appreciate all the work you're doing. We appreciate everything, all the doors you're opening for people that, like I said, you're not even going to meet. And students, advocate, because it's not only about you, but it's about your fellow students. You're going to open doors for people that you're not even going to meet. So we're all in this together, and you are not alone is speaking louder today than ever before. So we again appreciate you, and thank you so much for taking the time on a Monday night.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Have a great night.
You too. Bye.